My name is Benton Stokes. I'm a former fundamentalist, post-evangelical worship leader, and songwriter. I enjoy wry Manhattans, roller coasters, and road trips, just not all at the same time.
I'm Elaine O'Rourke, and I'm a teacher, an author, and a spiritual coach. I was a philosophy professor and a liberal pastor in a couple of former lives, and these days, I love aha moments and not-so-dry martinis.
We have conversations about life and God with a queer perspective, over cocktails, like you. This is Cocktail Theology. Well, you know summer is approaching when we're having mojitos.
That's right.
Yeah. Mojitos are actually something that I discovered pretty recently, I think, in my cocktail history. Probably in the last couple of years, really. But I do love mojitos. Mm-hmm. They are a bit of, they're a little labor intensive. They kind of require a lot. But we simplified this tremendously. So mojitos are rum, like white rum.
And sugar. That's important. That's an important piece. They have to be white. So
white rum is important, yeah. White rum, sugar, lime, mint, sparkling water. Mm-hmm. And you can play with the proportions, or you can play with, what kind of sparkling water you use or whatever. This one, we had a mint simple syrup that you so kindly made over the weekend because we were enjoying the Kentucky Derby. And you can't watch the Kentucky Derby without drinking a mint julep.
That's true. Or at least a virgin mint julep, or whatever they're calling them now.
Yeah, some
non-alcoholic mint julep.
Yes. So we did that. And so we had some mint simple syrup. Mm-hmm. This also has some lime and some lime simple syrup, so kind of a little bit of both.
I like that.
And then plantation rum, which is really good.
So good.
Really good. Now, plantation rum, interestingly, is a mix of rums from 3 different sources. So it's Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados.
Okay, so 3 different countries, not just 3 different distilleries, for example. Okay.
And rums vary widely from place to place.
Right.
So this is a really great balanced rum.
I like it.
Yeah. And it's also garnished with real mint leaves, which is awesome.
Yeah, the fresh mint is really, really spectacular. I do have a single complaint, though.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. So your glass is sparkling and pretty and has gorgeous mint leaves in it, and mine is nearly empty.
That is really a shame.
It's such a sad thing.
It's such a...
Welcome, summer.
Welcome, summer.
So, I brought to you a subject today that I want to talk about.
You did. I know you did.
So folks, what usually happens here is we discuss things that might be interesting to you or useful to you, or we look at what people have sent us and said, here, please talk about this, whatever.
Right.
And we usually decide on it together. However, today I was in my car coming back from the gym, and just so you know, that does not make me a very good gym goer. I happen to be coming back from the gym. I could have been coming back from the cement mixer. It doesn't matter, right? Okay. But I messaged Benton and said, I want to talk about Christ light. And he said, great. And then I explained what I meant. So that's where we are. And the reason I want to talk about this is it hit me today, something that you've been talking about to me for years, and I'm a little slow, so I just caught up. But about the fall and about that whole Adam and Eve expulsion from wherever they were, Eden. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right.
And about how important that has been.
Yes.
Right. In the way you've thought about the world, in how you experience Jesus and so forth. Do you want to add another sentence to that?
Yeah. I grew up in a tradition that reads the Bible quite literally. And that's a common trait of fundamentalist groups. Mm-hmm. One of the things that the church that I grew up in believes, and that I was indoctrinated with, was that Adam and Eve being kicked out of Eden was essentially God saying, talk to the hand. Uh-huh. And because of that, all descendants of Adam and Eve, which is all of us, are born with this inherent ugliness, this inherent sin nature that we can't do anything about. Yeah, I know.
It makes me crazy.
She's air punching everybody.
Yeah.
And so I grew up with that, and it's a very... there's so many things wrong with it, which I won't even get into the laundry list here. But the result of growing up with that kind of theology, or anybody that adheres to that theology, is there's a ton of guilt and a ton of shame all the time. And if not for Jesus doing what Jesus did on the cross, and then being seen as an acceptable sacrifice to God in exchange for our sin, if it were not for that, all of us would just be doomed to hell, because God would just send us all there, because that's what we earned because of what Adam and Eve did.
Right.
Again, lots of problems with this theology, and yet this is the predominant theology among evangelicals today.
So I want to suggest to you that it is the common theology in every place that Christendom has touched, whether we realize we have it or not.
Wow, yeah.
And here's why I say this. I think that, Christendom has been so good at spreading, and for good and ill, or for ill and good. I mean, there's been a lot of good about that as well. Please hear me. Because that has been the dominant myth of our lives. Remember, myths are just stories that we tell to explain.
Right.
Okay, that are common. Because that's been the dominant myth of our lives. Part of what, through all of these, particularly Western cultures that we have absorbed, is this underlying, we are not good, we are stained.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And that's actually not so bad if you can kind of take it as here's the human condition thing. Here's the problem. The problem is, how many of us feel as though we are inadequate, illegitimate, all but for, that there is nothing we can do to get rid of that inherited ugliness.
Yeah.
I think that underlies our workaholism.
Yes.
Our fashion industry.
Yes.
Our cosmetics industry. The fat, fit, whatever you want to call it, industry. And I'm using industries, but it doesn't have to be industries. It has to do with things like a parent saying, what are you going to do with your life? As if you have to. But Johnny, he's already done blah, blah, blah. All of this has to do with this understanding that we are inherently negative, shameful, unworthy of whatever. And I think we've absorbed it in this psychological way that has nothing to do with theology, but I think that this is the theology, this is the lens through which our psychology comes, our economics come. Like, I don't think there would have been John Smith's capitalism and Marx's socialism without Adam and Eve.
Wow. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Because there's this sense that we need to strive to overcome this innate ugliness, this innate worthlessness. That's a problem.
It is a huge problem for all of us.
And just from the point of reading the Bible, it's a problem because that's not there.
No, it's not.
Right? What is there is that they do something they know they shouldn't do. They are ashamed and they hide. And because of that, God says, because they're ashamed and they hide, because of that, God says, okay, you can't be here. And God pronounces what is apparently a curse. But what's important about all of that is when you're talking that kind of story, what's happening in that story is people are looking back and trying to make sense out of why their lives go wrong. Why it is that they feel ashamed. Why it is that, why do they have to work so hard in order to get plants to come from the ground, particularly in Mesopotamia, right? Like all of that. And then they look back and they say, here is this understanding we have. Oh, whatever they did is the cause of this.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
The job of myth is to explain our condition now and our looking back. It is not what God writes down to tell us how crappy we are. Like it's just two completely different ways of thinking about what it is you're reading.
Right.
So you can read it completely literally and understand that it's not the same picture that you were raised with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all of that matters, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Here's what came to me today. So for those of you who don't know, I'm in the middle of divorcing, and we've been together almost 30 years. Mm-hmm. So it's a BFD, right? And part of what I've been trying to figure out is, and here's the figure out part. Notice that right there, right there. That's part of this. What I've been trying to figure out is, what I did, what I could have done differently, blah, 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 blah. And there's a problem in that. And here's the problem. Mm-hmm. It says that all the way along through those 30 years, I was inadequate and I didn't know it.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, in no way am I going to go to, when we make mistakes, we haven't really made mistakes. They're really just part of our learning journey. I'm not going to go there. Mm-hmm. Okay. What I am going to say is that deep sense that we aren't enough, that we should do things differently, whatever, taints everything else.
Yeah.
So if I were to go back and make new decisions at every single point, there is no guarantee it all would have worked out differently.
Yeah.
Right? So then we have to look at, okay, all right, so let's stop. Where are we now? What does that mean now? And I bring this up because there's something about that sense of who we are deep down that permeates. When we are the woulda, coulda, shoulda people, it's because we feel like we did something so deeply wrong that it poisoned everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not Jesus. No. There is nothing in the Gospels to suggest that Jesus felt that, thought that, or did anything about that. So here is why we're talking about this today.
Okay.
Over and over in the Gospel of John, which is about as black and white as you can get in terms of morality and thought, even though it's kind of written from a Greek point of view. Over and over, Jesus is talking about, they are part of me, I am part of them, I am part of you. That, he does all this kind of major theological craziness. He never says, oh, except for me, they would be terrible. I want to suggest to you, and try this on, tell me what you think.
Okay.
I want to suggest to you that maybe we've been reading Jesus wrong. Maybe Jesus didn't come as a sacrifice to make up for all of our bad. Mm-hmm. Maybe instead Jesus came as God incarnate. Mm-hmm. That's important. As God incarnate, to show us that we are also imbued with whatever it is his Jesus-y, God-y DNA. Mm-hmm. Right. Maybe what he's actually trying to show is, this is who you are, not what you believe.
Yes.
This.
Yes.
And you don't have to achieve it. You don't have to go to a cross. Like, if you think that you need to go to a cross, then you don't believe Jesus did what he needed to do. So let's just back off. Mm-hmm. You don't have to go to a cross. There's no have to.
Yeah.
There is, what will you do, to quote Mary Oliver, what would you do with your one wild and precious life?
Yes, right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And imagine that if you read Adam and Eve as having that God DNA, that Christ light in them, and read them as innocent, and read them as not trusting themselves, not really knowing who God was, all those things. And then came all the way back down to Jesus and read him as saying, look at me, you and me, not so different. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you can have what I have because you have what I have.
Right.
Look at what I do. Try to do that. It's similar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thoughts?
Well, I mean, as you're saying that, the gospel, according to Jesus, was actually not that complicated.
Nope.
And he lived his gospel. Mm-hmm. He didn't just teach it.
Right. It didn't require anybody else to know it.
Right.
He told it, didn't require it.
Right. Mm-hmm. I believe that gels really well with what you just said, because if that's the gospel of Jesus, and if Jesus is one with his Father, and this is what God wants us to know, and Jesus is living that way and demonstrating it for us, then it makes sense that the reason Jesus was here was to do just that.
Yeah.
To tell us what the gospel was, and to live the gospel, and to say, here, do it like me.
Yeah.
Because you can.
Because you can. Not because you can never achieve what I have, because I'm this special kind of creature. And I truly believe, I hope our listeners understand, I believe Jesus was special. I believe there is something unique about Jesus. But it's not what we think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
Imagine if you read through all of this stuff and read through the striving and read through the I'm not enough and everything in terms of you're already having God's DNA. You're already being completely fine, just as you are. Could you make better decisions? Could you have better habits? Sure. But is there anything wrong with you? No.
No.
Suppose that following Jesus wasn't about winning or proving yourself or making sure that other people know that you're still right with God. Suppose it wasn't about whether you're gay, black, female, I don't know, throw in whatever it is you're uncomfortable with in the world. Suppose it wasn't that. Suppose it was, Jesus showed me how at peace I could be in my daily life if I simply accepted God's light within me. And then lived that way, not just in our heads, but in our bodies, in what we do. Now that takes work, don't get me wrong. It takes therapy, it takes practice, it takes, all the things, I don't know what all it takes for each individual person. It takes work to get there.
Work. Yes.
But it's not about the work.
And when I was living under that old theology, the work was making sure that I did everything right.
Right.
All the time.
Right.
Like, don't break any of the rules. And the threat of hell, the threat of hell was the thing that kept me in line. Not the joy of having communion with God.
Right.
Not the joy of living a full life full of generosity and all the things that Jesus demonstrated, because I just want to live more like Jesus. And the more I do, the more joy I have.
Yes!
Right?
Yes.
But instead, it's living in abject terror that God is going to literally strike me dead because I looked the wrong way at a boy walking down the street.
So I want our listeners who are still kind of living under that, and I think, I'm just going to be honest with you, I think all of us are living with this. I think it is a cultural phenomenon, and not just in the U.S. Anywhere that Christendom has actually moved, there is this sense that we are inadequate. I'm wondering what would happen if our listeners really did the work to believe that they have the Christ light within them and it can't go away.
Yeah, that would change everything.
I think we should try it.
Yeah. Listeners, how does that sound to you? The theology that I've worked really hard to get out from under, it really kept me in a dark place.
Yes.
And I think many, many Christians, instead of striving to follow Jesus, are striving not to mess up.
Yes.
So they're missing the joy of what it is to follow Jesus, and they're living with the hardship of what it is to live by a code.
Right.
And that the threat of somehow missing something or messing up in some way, even the sins that we don't even know that we commit, right?
And being on the wrong side.
Yeah, and being on the wrong side could send you to hell, which is a whole nother episode. But listeners, just hear us when we say life does not have to be that way, and you do not have to live your life in fear that you're going to mess up and God is going to strike you dead.
That's right.
So we love to hear from you. Cocktail Theology is where we are all the time. Bring us your questions. Bring us your comments. Even if you disagree, we definitely want to hear from you. You can always find us there, and you can find us here every Thursday. Till next time, friends.
Bye.
Funny how the change, how life just seems to rearrange itself. No matter what it was, I don't know how it goes, but look, moving on feels pretty good. Moving on feels pretty good.
If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like and hit subscribe wherever you're listening right now. We welcome your comments, questions, and ideas for conversations and for cocktails. Please get in touch with us at our website, cocktailtheology.com. Cocktail Theology is a production of SFS. Our theme song is Moving On Feels Pretty Good, recorded by yours truly, Benton Stokes. You can find my music wherever you stream your favorite artists. Join us next Thursday for another new episode.